This video is 23 minutes long. Using AI, it interpreted the United States from before its founding to today. Over 250 years of development. Let's make it clear once. July 4, 1776. 56 people crowded in a hot, narrow room. Sign your name on a document. This document was equivalent to the world's most powerful empire at that time. The British Empire declared war. An unjustifiable charge of betrayal. Only 170 years later, this country was born from a paper declaration. Earlier and later it destroyed human history. The axis of two devastating world wars. Realizing atomic splitting, putting the national flag on the moon. However, it does not rely on common blood. The millennium is built. It is rooted in a set of ideas. More than 200 years ago. Americans are always there. What exactly this idea represents? Constant conflict, constant struggle. 13 only contradict each other. Colonies on the eastern coast of mainland. How to grow step by step. The world's leading modern power. Several times more risky towards self-division. I want to find answers. We need to put the time back. More than 150 years ago, the Declaration of Independence was signed. Go to Virginia, a mosquito-plunged swamp river. May 1607. Approximately 100 people were funded by the Virginia Company. British immigrant involved in water registration. Built Jamestown. This is Britain's first permanent settlement in North America. This location is only for defending Spanish ships. Totally inappropriate to survive. Poor water sources plague. Conflict with local Bovitans. In just a few years, the vast majority of immigrants have died. Until colonist John Rolfe opened a tobacco plantation. It is only this colony that has found an economic pillar to rely on. In 1619, two successive events occurred in the Virginia colony. Remake the great future fate of America. A colony established by the will of burgesses. It is the first British people-elected legislature in North America. The seats of the continental autonomous land. Two of them have a Dutch license. British robbed a ship to stop at port. About 20 blacks were hijacked from Africa. The settlers bought them as long-term laborers. It opens up the history of African forced labor in North America. Colonial autonomy and black forced labor. From the origins of British North American colonial era. They live on the same land. This contradiction is rooted in the foundations of North America's development. The foot has been around for almost 250 years. Until the Civil War in North Korea ended. The complete liquidation of slavery. Near the northern region. In 1620, a group of British separatists. The Mayflower crossed the Atlantic. The establishment of the Primus colony in Massachusetts. 41 men signed the Mayflower Convention. Agree according to the will of a majority. Joint governance of communities. This is a very symbolic precedent for the idea of autonomy. In the first winter, half of immigrants are allowed. Survivors rely on the help of indigenous people to survive. The Scottish Indians church they grow native crops. For decades. British colonial forces are expanding along the Atlantic coast. Gradually forming 13 independent colonies. Each colony holds an exclusive royal license. They have very different economic models. Relationship with the British royal family. Purchase control the New England area. Pennsylvania, founded in 1682 by the Gages. Rhode Island, built by religious exiles. Early unified regions such as Carolina. Each has a unique religious atmosphere and industrial structure. The entire British North American colony is more like a scattered plate. It is not a complete land of unified planning governance. Internal contradictions, religious conflicts constantly. In 1692, the Massachusetts colony erupted with a temporarily turbulent Salem hunting movement. Religious panic has torn down the whole town's order. Eventually, 20 people were executed by hanging. This history is clearly confirmed. Even a society based on biblical religious order. Group panic can also easily devour reason and the rule of law. In the mid-18th century, England and France fought for global domination. The North American colony is one of the main battlefields for both sides. From 1754 to 1763, the French-Indian War broke out. He is a fashionable and young officer, George Washington. In this war, valuable early military operational experience was accumulated. Britain eventually won the war. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1763, France has seized almost all of the colonial territories in North America. But this long war has dramatically increased the debt of Britain's treasury. The size of the state debt almost doubled. The British Parliament believes North American colonies enjoy the territorial security dividend brought by war. The colonial residents should bear part of the military expenses. This decision filled the huge hidden danger of a complete breakup between colonies and motherland. It began in 1765. The British government continues to lend direct taxes in North America. The first introduction was the Print Tax Act. All categories of printed goods, such as newspapers and documents, are subject to tax. Because North American colonies do not have a representative seat in the British Parliament, colonial people launched mass protests. He used a classic slogan, "No representative, no taxpayer." The Print Tax Act was forced to be repealed after 1 year of enforcement. But Britain has not stopped trying to impose taxes. A number of new taxes followed. The conflict between the hosts and colonies continues to escalate. March 1770. British soldiers in Boston shoot at civilians protesting. 5 people died. The Boston tragedy. Rendering by advertisers such as Paul Revere enlarged. The reaction of the public completely burst out. The night of December 16, 1773, colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians board a British cargo ship at the port of Boston, dropped 342 cups of tea into the ocean, protesting the tea tax. This incident was the Boston Tea Incident. The British Parliament has subsequently passed a series of strict penalties bills. The colonial people called it intolerable. Reconciliation is no longer possible. April 19, 1775. The British Army is ordered to go into the colony for militia weapons. Located in Lexington and Concord, facing local armed militias face confrontation. No one knows exactly who fired the first shot. The sound of this gunshot is referred to in later times as the worldwide shooting. The American War of Independence broke out. Second year. Representatives from 13 colonies gather in Philadelphia. The Second Continental Conference. The vote passed a resolution to withdraw from British rule. 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson serves as the main flagsman, writing the Declaration of Independence. The document was formally adopted on July 4, 1776. The overwhelming majority of the representatives until August that year only successively complete the signing of paper documents. The way of the Continental Army's conquest is extremely difficult and tragic. From 1777 to 1778, during the winter residence of Volcano, nearly 2,000 soldiers died in severe cold, epidemics, and famine. The key moment. France has provided vital military spending to the North American Army, weapons and military support. It completely reversed the battlefield situation. October 1781. British Commander General Cornwallis surrenders in York City, Virginia. In 1783, the United States signs the Paris Treaty. The United Kingdom officially recognizes the sovereign independence of America in international law. The colony, despite winning the War of Independence. But the United States at that time had not yet built up a complete set of unified national governance. The system. The early governance framework of the founding state federal regulations are completely weak. Failure to coordinate the debts of states, mediation in interstate territorial disputes. From 1786 to 1787, a secesh peasant uprising broke out in Massachusetts. Completely exposed the deadly vulnerabilities of this system. In the summer of 1787, representatives from all states gathered in Philadelphia to hold a constitutional assembly. Washington presides over drafting a new constitution. Establish legislation, administrative, judiciary, 3 powers separated by a balanced government structure. The Constitution deliberately avoided the core dispute of slavery, introducing Three-Fifths Compromise. Statistics on seats in Congress by population base. Each black slave accounted for 3/5 of the population. This compromise only delays a moral contradiction. The problem has not been solved from the root. The Constitution of 1788 was officially ratified to calm the concerns of people about individual freedoms being undercut. In 1791, 10 amendments were added. The Law of Powers. In 1789, Washington became the first president of America. The federal government has officially performed its duties. Within 10 years of the founding, the American political world has gradually split into two major opposing factions. The Federal Party led by Alexander Hamilton. The Democratic-Republican Party founded by Thomas Jefferson. Both parties are within the scope of federal government power. Diplomatic tactics of the French Revolution. There are huge fundamental differences. In 1798, the Federal Congress, controlled by the Bundestag, the law of rebellion and incitement to revolt. Public criticism of the federal government is considered a crime. This is the young republic. For the first time, we face a serious challenge to fundamental principles of free speech. In 1803, Jefferson ruled the federal government. It cost $15 million. Purchase of vast Louisiana territories from France. The size of the United States almost doubles. The door to westward expansion of the North American continent is now completely opened. Subsequently, Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark to form an expedition team. In-depth exploration of whole new territories. The women of the Shawnee tribe, Socagavia. The entire course provided the expedition team with essential guidance and survival assistance. Continued expansion of Western territory. An escalation of geographical contradictions between Britain and America. In 1812 the war officially broke out. The direct cause of war. Britain to impose a transatlantic trade blockade. At the same time, secretly armed forces support North American Indian tribes. Stop the expansion of white migration to Western territories. In 1814, the British invaded Washington, D.C. They set fire to the White House and Parliament building. What is very dramatic? The Battle of New Orleans in January 1815. The two sides have already signed a peace treaty in Europe, limited by the efficiency of distant ocean communications at that time. The news of the ceasefire failed to reach North America in time. This war eventually ended with both sides handing over won and fell. Unfortunately, there was a national consensus. To help Americans truly establish their own independent and unified national identity, a large number of white immigrants continued to invade indigenous land westward. President Andrew Jackson promoted the 1830 Indian Migration Act, forced demand for indigenous tribes in the southeastern United States. Total relocation to Mississippi and remote areas west of the country. Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw. The 5 major indigenous tribes, forced to embark on a long mandatory migration. From 1838 to 1839. The difficult migration of the Cherokee people. It is known as the Way of Tears. Only Cherokee, one tribe. There are about 4,000 people suffering from severe cold and hunger. Died on a strange path. If you count after the migration is over, subsequent deaths caused by sickness. The actual number of victims is even higher. It is also one of the deadliest humanitarian disasters in modern American history. The same period, Jackson also sparked the famous banking war. He rejected the second box of Bank China's Gold Bank concession. He believes that large national banks will monopolize the wealth of a country. They oppress ordinary people. And his entire governing logic releases a clear signal. As long as the need for white Western expansion exists, the federal government will use state power. Force expulsion of generations from indigenous tribes that lived here. The 19th and 40s. Prevails in the country. Americans generally strongly believe. Complete territorial expansion across the entire North American continent. It is God's mission to the beast. Texas joined the United States. Border territorial conflict broke out. In 1846 the Mexican War officially began. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalajara enters into force. Mexico cuts almost half of its territory. Includes now California, Nevada, Utah and parts of several states. The United States has since crossed the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. A week before the signing, California's Sut and House found gold mine, heated from 1848 to 1849. Around 300,000 people from all over the United States and even worldwide have fled to Western Europe. California, a state that took only 2 years to change. Local indigenous communities are again displaced. Newly acquired Western territory throws unsolved problems. Will the new territory allow slavery to survive? The parties have submitted a compromise bill. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, the Compromise Act of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. All this is only a brief delay in the positive conflict between North and South. In 1857, the Supreme Court ruled against Dred Scott and Sanford. Judgment. Black people, whether or not they have a free identity, none of them have U.S. citizenship. Congress has no right to prohibit slavery in the territory. This ruling has sharpened conflict in the North and South. The slave movement is thriving. In 1838, Frederick Douglass escaped from slavery, becoming the core of slave abolition movement. Harriet Tubman Tubman deep south, relying on the Underground Railway leads a large number of blacks to freedom. In 1860, Lincoln was elected president. Its core position is against the expansion of slavery abroad. Southern 7 states announced their departure from the Federation before he officially took office. Later, 4 other states achieved independence. April 12, 1861. Confederate troops fire at Summerburg, South Carolina. The Civil War in the North and South officially began. This war was the deadliest conflict in American history. Traditional historians estimate the total number of deaths to be 620,000. 2011 scholars re-statistics calculations. The estimated real number of deaths reached 750,000. The exact numbers are still academically controversial to date. January 1, 1863. Abraham Lincoln issued the Declaration of Liberty. All black slaves in the Confederate control area are released. The aim of the war ranged from merely preserving federal integrity, upgrading to abolishing slavery itself. The Battle of Gettysburg became a turning point in the Civil War. The fighting resulted in a total of approximately 51,000 casualties. After the war ended, Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes at a commemoration ceremony on the battlefield. The Gettysburg speech became a chapter in the history of classics. April 9, 1865. General Robert Bonney surrendered at the Court of Appomattox. The Civil War essentially declared an end. 5 days later, Lincoln was shot at the Ford Theater in Washington by John Wilkes Booth. The next day he died. The Federation can be secured. The president who led the country out of war is gone forever. After the war entered Reconstruction, 3 major constitutional amendments have been passed. The 13th Amendment of 1865 abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment of 1868 established the standards for citizenship and equal protection by law. The 15th Amendment of 1870 gave black men the right to vote. In just a few years, black people in the South gained right to vote for public office, build own community institutions. But the 1876 general elections were controversial, and parties reached a political deal. In 1877, all federal troops withdrew from the South. Previous advances in racial equality have been systematically destroyed. Southern states have successively enacted the Jim Crow Act, forcing apartheid. Combined with voting limit, weapons such as private crime and violence oppress black people. Related injustice has lasted for almost a century. The promise of equality made in 1865. It wasn't until almost a century later that substantial progress was made. In 1867, Secretary of State Souther paid more than $7 million. Russia buys Alaska. The deal was full of ridicule at the time. It's called the Stupid of Sweeney. Subsequently, local gold or oil resources were excavated. It is only people who realize the immense value of this land. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railway was completed. The process of nationwide industrialization is advancing rapidly. Andrew Carnegie's steel industry. John Rockefeller's oil industry. A near-monopoly industrial giant. Mark Twain referred to this period as the Duking era. The appearance blossoms. An internal gap filled with corruption and extreme poverty. Millions of Southern and Eastern European immigrants flock to the United States. Entry through Ellis Island. Dreaming of opportunity. Eventually, they can only get stuck in crowded coves. Working in high-risk factories. In 1924, Congress passed a new Immigration Act. Established national immigration quotas. Restrictions on immigrants entering South and Eastern Europe. At the same time, almost entirely banned Asian immigration. Workers at the bottom level continue to protest. 1886 Chicago Sweetened Market Workers Gathering. Explosions and shootings. Many police and civilians were killed. In 1894, the National Pullman Railway Great Strike broke out. President Grover Cleveland mobilizes the Federal Army. It only calmed up the unrest. Social reforms are treating as adultery. February 1898. U.S. Marine vessel bombed at Port of Havana. 266 sailors were killed. Modern technical evidence shows that accidents are likely to be caused by internal failure of the ship. But then the media deliberately blamed Spain. Stimulate people's opposite emotions. The United States declares war on Spain. This battle lasted only a few months and was over. According to the post-war treaty, the United States takes control of the Philippines, Puerto Rico and Guam. Cuba achieved independence in its name. The United States once focused only on the development of its mainland, formally transformed into an empire with overseas colonies. Immediately after the Progressive Era, implementing anti-monopoly enforcement laws at home, improved labor protection regulations. The women's right to vote campaign has been fighting for more than 70 years. The 19th Amendment came into force in 1920. Women get the right to vote. 1917 In 1917, President Woodrow Wilson leads the United States, which has remained neutral for years. Joining the First World War, U.S. troops reversed the Western Line, assisting the Allied states to victory in November 1918. After the war, Wilson initiated an international alliance. The aim is to prevent future wars. But the U.S. Senate rejected its proposal for membership. Early a breakdown in the global power of America and willingness to participate internationally appeared. In the 1920s, domestic economy grew prosperous. The rise of jazz culture. At the same time, a ban on alcohol is enforced. October 29, 1929 Black Tuesday, the stock market collapsed. The Great Depression swept across the United States. In 1933, the unemployment rate reached 25%. Southern plains suffer from prolonged drought. Decades of gross farming, causing dust and environmental disaster. Thousands of farmers have been forced to leave their homes. That same year, President Roosevelt introduced a new government. A series of federal bailouts have been introduced. Economic recovery and social reform bill. Although the Depression has not completely ended, but it fundamentally reshaped the relationship between people and federal government. December 7, 1941. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, Hawaii U.S. Naval Base. More than 2,400 people died. The United States is fully involved in World War II. June 6, 1944 landing in Normandy. 73,000 American soldiers are involved. This is the largest cross-sea landing operation in human history. The war on the Pacific battlefield is nearing a tragic end. August 6, 1945 9th. The United States then dropped long-running atomic bombs on Hiroshima, Japan. Early in the bombing, more than 100,000 people were killed. A large number of injured radiopaths have died. The need for an atomic bomb and the ethical controversy. It is still repeatedly examined by historians and ethicists. Soon after, Japan declared surrender. World War II officially ended. The war profoundly transformed American society. 6 million women entered an industrial plant for the first time. Roth became an iconic cultural symbol. In 1942, the federal government forced displacement. Nearly 120,000 Americans are increasingly detained. Most of them are Native American nationals. The federal government officially apologized for this policy until 1988. After the war, military resettlement bill landed, funding 10 million veterans to enter university, apply for a housing loan, generate a thriving middle class with large residential communities in suburbs. After the end of World War II, U.S.-South Korea launches decades of Cold War confrontation. Nuclear deterrent agents war ideological confrontation became the main line of time. The 1950 to 1953 Korean War broke out, ended with a ceasefire agreement. The Korean peninsula is permanently divided. Extreme terrorism breeds up in the country. The birth of McCarthyism. Senator Joseph McCarthy, by false accusations alone, destroying the careers and honor of countless people. In 1954, the Senate formally condemned him. That same year, the Supreme Court ruled on Brunson's case. Apartheid in public schools is unconstitutional. 1955 Montgomery, Alabama. Shirtwoman Rosa Parks refuses to give up seats for white passengers. Caused by full bus resistance movement. The young pastor Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement. Break apartheid voting restrictions in a nonviolent protest. The Great Washington March of 1963. Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech. In 1964, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act. Prohibition of apartheid in public places. The Electoral Rights Act of 1965. Eliminate a large number of legal provisions that prevent black voting. Equal progress pays a heavy price. April 4, 1968. Martin Luther King was murdered in Memphis. June 1969. New York police assault 10 country bus. Cause people to resist demonstrations on a daily basis. This incident was recognized. The starting point of the LGBTQ equality movement. The U.S. South space race continues in daylight. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched its first artificial satellite. July 20, 1969. American astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first human to step on the moon. About 600 million people worldwide watch live broadcasts simultaneously. 20th century, 60s to 70s. The United States was deeply involved in the Vietnam War. A massive increase in troops since 1965. More than 2 million young Americans are required to join the army. Domestic anti-war march here. Public confidence in the government continues to fall. May 1970. Kent State University, Ohio. National Guard officers shoot at anti-war students. 4 people killed in national shock. Nixon visited China in 1972, ending 20 years of official hostility between the two countries. The same year the Watergate incident broke out. Members of the presidential campaign team illegally broke into Democratic National Committee's Watergate office. The building. Subsequently, a series of concealed acts gradually failed to emerge. August 9, 1974. Nixon resigns as president. He is the only president in American history to resign. Saigon fell in 1975. U.S. troops evacuated from Vietnam. 1973 Arab countries impose an embargo on oil. Gasoline prices rose 4 times overnight. In the late 1970s, a country fell into mental impairment. High inflation, high unemployment, and economic stagnation. Traditional economic policies are hard to solve the crisis. People's confidence in the state system economic outlook dropped to a low point. In the 1980s, Reagan had substantially expanded its arms against the Soviet Union domestic tax cuts easing industry regulation. Experts believe this policy will accelerate the Cold War and end it. Critics say the gap between rich and poor continues to grow. The 1986 Iran-Gate scandal was exposed. Government officials privately sell weapons to Iran and delivered illegal proceeds to the armed rebels of Nicaragua. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. 1991 The Soviet Union officially dissolved. The United States becomes the world's only superpower. Over 250 years. War depression, social splitment, Economic recovery. One core main line runs through the entire history of America. This country is based on an unfulfilled commitment to equality for all. Every social progress stems from the ongoing struggle of people. The literal power of non-state instruments. The ideals written by the Philadelphia Limiters have never been fully fulfilled. You may never get the ultimate standard answer. American history is sufficient to prove it. The question of equal citizens' rights will never end. Generation after generation, ordinary people who did not have the right to happen at that time, constantly reinterpreting the original founder's mind. Colonies scattered off the coast. After the Revolution of Independence, Civil War and Industrial Wave. 2 World Wars. There are various issues of equality still at play. The United States has grown to have a population of more than 300 million, gathering together the world's great powers of all ethnic groups. It does not bind people by blood. Rather, rely on a set full of controversies. A shared spiritual legacy of ongoing debate. Until today, people are still either peaceful or fierce arguing. The words in the 1776 Declaration. What exactly should it mean?